Hi, in this video I'm going to design a partial framework, including an acrylic overdenture. For this I select the work type partial framework for all the teeth that are currently missing and will be replaced by acrylic dummy teeth later on. Now I can start with my design. I can either go to Design Partial, where I can only design my partial framework, or I can go to Design, where I started DentalCAD and can also set up my acrylic dummy teeth before designing the partial framework. This is what I'm going to do in this case. As my first step, I have to select the library I'm going to use. In this case, I'm going to use the alternative library, but you can use every integrated tooth library in exocad. With two simple clicks on the given points, I can set up a whole row of teeth. I have to do this for every area of neighboring teeth. In the next step, I can correct the position and orientation of my tooth setup. For rows of teeth, I recommend using the chain mode, so you can move them in regards to their contact points and don't have to move them all individually. Once I'm happy with my tooth setup, I'm just going next. The software reminds me that I can adapt the contact points, but there's no need to do that in this case, so I'm just going next again. Until this version, you had to select I'm done and would close down the DentalCAD now to go back to your DentalDB. But now you have the PartialCAD design button. If you select this option, the DentalCAD doesn't close down at all, but the partial framework software opens up directly. In the partial framework, the first step is to create your survey model. I recommend hiding your antagonist for this. You can set your view direction to correlate to your insertion axis and then just click Set from View to set up your insertion axis as you want it. You can see the strength of your undercuts from your chosen insertion axis color-coded. When you found your insertion axis, you can actually set up a draft angle. I'm choosing 2 degrees in this case, and press Apply to create your survey model. In the next step, I can edit the Blockout Wax on my survey model. For this, I can simply remove wax in the areas where I want to set up my clasps. In the undercuts, I can see the strength of the undercut color-coded. Holding down the Shift key, I can also add Blockout Wax in areas where I suspect that there would be pressure on the gingiva later on. In the next step, I can draw the outer outline of my retention meshes. In this specific case, I plan on designing more narrow fishbone-like structures, so I'm drawing a more narrow line. You will see why I do this later on when setting up the retention mesh directly in Wax. In case you're unhappy with the design of your curve, you can press Edit Curve and just move around the control points to change the outline of the curve completely. Drawing a smaller closed curve inside of your retention mesh curve will give you a gingiva stop later on. For your sublingual bar, you just have to draw one singular open curve. This will mark the midline of the bar. In the next step, the Apply Mesh step, you can create your retention mesh in wax. In this case, I'm choosing a higher value for my mesh wax thickness. I can use the hole size slider for every single retention mesh, but I can also use the control points and the arrows on all of the meshes to change them individually. I use those tools to set up my retention mesh in a way that the cross section between the holes will actually be used to give me the fishbone retention mesh I want. When placing your retention mesh, I recommend paying close attention to your acrylic dummy teeth that you can see as a reference. I aim to place the retention in a way that the black areas, which later will be the wax, are placed underneath the acrylic dummy teeth, so in the approximal contact points you don't see any metal later on. Once you placed your retention, you can press Apply to convert it to green wax. As you see, when your retention mesh is applied, it gets placed on top of refractory wax in the same shape as the curve that you drawn before. You can also already see the stops that get applied inside of the refractory. In the next step, we're going to design our sublingual bar. You see the initial proposal. I normally prefer to change the settings of the bar in a way that I get an offset of the bar above the gingiva, so it is not in contact. In this case, I'm also deactivating the capped ends to get a hard cutoff on both ends of the bar. I do this because it will help me later on when designing the transition between the bar and the rest of the retention mesh. In the next step, you have the option to draw an apron. In this case, this is not necessary, so I'm just going to press Next. Now it is time to design our clasps. Since there's many different ways of applying clasps and every partial framework is completely individual, you can draw as many curves for your clasps as you want, in any shape that you want. In this case, I'm drawing very simple clasps that go around the tooth once and end in the area where I want to apply my occlusal rest later on. Once you've drawn all the curves for your clasps that you desire, you can go next. In this step, you can choose the specific profiles for all of your clasps. Simply click on one of the clasps and select a profile from the drop-down menu. Here I'm staying with the anterior profile, but in the settings you can actually deactivate the width tapering on both of the ends. I'm deselecting the width tapering on the one end where the occlusal rest will be placed. Since the software has no way of knowing how many and what shapes of clasps you want to apply for your partial framework, you obviously have to do this for every single one of the curves that you plan on using for clasps. In the next step, we have our fill in wax or clone tool. This allows you to draw a set thickness of green wax directly on your refractory. At the bottom, you can select between different presets of thickness. First, I'm drawing the occlusal rests in the area where I see that the dentist prepared for this. Then I can apply some minor connectors to my clasps to connect them to my retention wax. I'm also drawing a curved connection between the sublingual bar and the retention mesh, connecting all of the pieces together. Please pay attention that you don't draw the wax directly underneath your curved sublingual bar, which has a distance to your gingiva. Otherwise, you fill up this distance directly with the clone tool. You see that I may use the presets, but the presets only change the thickness of the wax that gets applied. I can also change this individually using the slider on the bottom or using my mouse wheel with the shift button. When you're happy with your rough design, you can just go next again. This doesn't have to look perfect yet, you will get a smoothing step later on. The next step is the step to draw your finish lines. I plan on showing you an alternative way of designing finish lines, so I'm just going next. The software asks me if I'm sure about that, and I say yes. In this step I can add parts, which is also not desired in this case, so again I'm just going next. In the next step I can edit my wax, which means using a kind of wax knife I can add, remove or smooth the material. Both the adding and removing also smooth at the same time, the same way real wax in real life would behave. You can use this to correct all the little dents and mistakes you made while designing, or everything that still looks really rough. I recommend paying close attention and taking your time in editing the wax. You want your partial framework to look good in the end, and the more attention you pay now and the more perfect you design it now, the better your outcome after printing will be. As you see, I create the areas where I will want to place my finish lines later on really smooth and flat. On the occlusal rests, I'm not only smoothing the occlusal rests themselves, I'm also removing a little bit of material so to create a little indentation. On the bottom you can activate the checkmark for blend smoothly into mask. This way you can smoothen the transition between the wax and the model, so your occlusal rest will not be as sharp of an edge for the tongue of your patient. Now that I'm happy with my finished design, I'm switching to the expert mode, because there's still some things to do. I will select the curve tool again and draw my finish line directly on top of my edited wax. This option is automatically selected in this case, but on the bottom you see 3 round buttons. These buttons allow you to select if you want your curve to adapt to your green wax, or your refractory model, or to nothing at all. Now I'm going to use the pipe tool, which is only available in the expert mode. This allows you to apply a completely round radius of wax around the drawn curve you applied. I'm selecting a very thin diameter for the pipe. This simulates a round wax wire that many people use to create a finish line in real life as well. And now I'm switching back to the wizard mode. I'm back in the edit wax tab where I left off. I'm using this to apply and add mesh on one of the sides of the finish line to get a smooth transition to my acrylics later on. This resembles more closely the way you would apply a finish line in real life in wax as well. There's pros and cons about both ways of applying a finish line, the one step in the wizard or this way. Since this way resembles the traditional manual way more closely, for manual dental technicians it's easier to understand what they're doing here and what they want to achieve. You can activate the checkmark for Hide Blockout and Refractory to completely hide your blockout model. This gives you the option to actually edit the underside of your partial framework, something you're not able to do in real life at all. You can use this to smoothen out all of the transition areas and edges that you created while designing a partial framework. Don't be afraid to add material. If the wax intersects your refractory, it will be removed and blocked out again later on. I can use this tool as well to smooth out all the artifacts that I created when smoothing my wax directly into my model. I recommend using the add functionality for this, as to not remove too much of your wax directly. Once I'm done with all of the smoothing, I will switch back to the expert mode. I am again using the curve tool, this time to draw a line on my retention mesh to get a support structure on top of it. I am again using the pipe tool, this time with a higher diameter of 2 mm to give me a stronger fishbone retention. Back in the wizard mode, I'm in my edit wax step again. I'm using this now to finish up and smoothen a little bit the design of my retention. Once I'm done, I'm going to press next. In this step I could build the finished STL of my partial framework, but once again I'm switching to the expert mode. Now I'm going to use the tool Add Post. This gives me the possibility to add retention posts underneath my acrylic dummy teeth. Until now this only gave you smooth posts, but since the Plovdiv version you can actually choose files. In this case I'm choosing the Fusilio file, which gives you a shape of 2 intertwined wires, which you can change in their length and in their thickness. You can select the position and the direction of your retention post, and then just press Apply to actually convert it to green wax. You can do this for every single one of your acrylic dummy teeth, and you can change the length and size of your retention posts as well individually. Using the control point on top of your retention post, you can change the direction of the post itself. I recommend, if you plan on designing those acrylic teeth in the DentalCAD later on, not to change the direction of them too much in regards to each other. Once I'm happy with my retention posts, I click on the wizard again. Now I'm back to my build step, and I can click the Save for Build button. This creates an STL out of my partial framework. If I wanted to change something, I could click on Delete Constructed Part and get back to my green wax step, but in this case I'm done and the partial framework closes down. I'm right back at my DentalCAD, which was still open. Now I can import the partial framework because the software realized that this file is now present. You see it right here underneath my acrylic dummy teeth, and I can go next to design my overdenture now. I'm asked to save the scene, which I'm doing in this case. For the design of my overdenture, the first step is my insertion action to block out the complete model and the partial framework as one piece. It's the same as in a bite splint or a surgical guide, so you should already be familiar with this step. As always, you have a set of parameters that you can select, like your offset or the strength of your undercuts, Additionally, you could freeform this blocked out model, but I don't have to do this in this case, so I'm just going next. In this step, you have to draw the outline of the acrylic parts of your partial framework. You can switch the acrylic dummy teeth to transparent or completely invisible to have an easier line following your finish line when drawing this curve. In the wizard, you see a set of parameters where you can not only select your base thickness of the pink gum acrylics, but also the specific cervical thickness around your teeth if you want to have a different value there. Additionally, you can select the smoothing, which shows how more smooth the gingiva design will be in regards to the model which it is based on. As always, a simple double click starts the calculation of the gingiva design. If you're unhappy with the outcome of the design, you can now still change the parameters or the curve itself, but if you're happy with what the software gave you, you can just press next. Obviously, for every area of gingiva you want to design, you have to do the step individually. In this next step, you can freeform your gingiva design. You have your anatomic tools and also your classical brush tools as always. Color-coded, you can see the thickness of your gingiva design. In this case, the green color indicates a thickness of 1 mm, which was the thickness parameter I chose in a step beforehand. If this is too thin for your liking, you obviously can choose a thicker parameter beforehand in the step while designing your gingiva. Using the anatomical tool, you can just pull up the gingiva in the proximal contact points. You can also use the add or remove tool to achieve this. I prefer doing this to create a pocket in the gingiva for my acrylic tooth to be placed into later on. I recommend paying close attention to the areas where you placed your retention posts. Since the material is added in the minimum thickness, often the material intersects the acrylic dummy teeth. It's no problem to just remove this gingiva material and even leave a hole on top of the retention post. For the last step of your overdenture design, you will create the tooth pockets for your acrylic dummy teeth and adapt every single piece of acrylic to all the other pieces at the same time. For this, I simply press on apply. You see a lot of different parameters that you can change up based on your production method or your material used. Here you can see the single individual parts in regards to each other. You see the material of the gingiva is adapted not only to the model underside, but also to your acrylic dummy teeth. Now you go next and everything gets merged to singular pieces. As you see from the bottom, the gingiva is adapted to your partial framework and your model, and the acrylic dummy teeth are also adapted to the partial framework and the gingiva design, so everything should smoothly fit together in the end. Now you can print or mill all of the individual pieces and stick everything together using acrylics. Since we plan on using this lower jaw case as the antagonist for our upper jaw bar case, I'll save all of this as one STL. Thank you for your attention.